Their target seemed carefully chosen. A blind black man standing alone on his porch, a symbol of vulnerability in their eyes. They saw weakness where none existed. To them, he was an easy target, someone they could intimidate and silence. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have guessed, was that this man had spent his life in the shadows of war, honing skills and instincts that had saved countless lives. As the gang's intentions turned from words to violence, their actions would spark a confrontation that would ripple far beyond that night. What began as a cowardly show of dominance would ignite a battle for the soul of the neighborhood. And by the time the dust settled, the very power structures they had relied on to protect them would crumble, revealing just how dangerous it is to underestimate someone with nothing to lose and everything to protect. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe. The streetlights buzzed faintly, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement as Elijah Eli Walker made his way home. The neighborhood was alive with muted sounds, the distant murmur of a radio, a baby crying, and the occasional bark of a restless dog. It was a place of resilience, where people greeted each other with nods and guarded smiles. But beneath the surface, a tension simmered. Eli tapped his cane lightly against the sidewalk, his movements deliberate. He didn't need the cane to find his way. Years of training had taught him to navigate with little more than echoes and instinct. But he carried it anyway, a concession to the image people expected of a blind man. He passed the Johnsons' house, where Mrs. Johnson sat on the porch, rocking gently in her chair. "Evening, Mr. Walker," she called, her voice tinged with warmth and weariness. "Evening, ma'am," Eli replied, tipping his head in her direction. As he neared his own house, he felt it before he heard it. A shift in the air. The kind of quiet that meant trouble. Voices drifted toward him from across the street, low and mocking. "Hey, look at this guy," one of them said, the words laced with venom. "What's he supposed to be? Some kind of ghost?" Laughter followed, harsh and cutting. Eli slowed his pace, his grip tightening on the cane. The group stepped out from the shadows, a pack of 5 men, all bald with tattooed arms that gleamed under the streetlights. They moved with the kind of confidence born from years of unchecked cruelty. Their leader, a stocky man with a snake tattoo coiling around his neck, spat on the ground and crossed the street toward Eli. "Hey, blind boy," he sneered. "You lost or something? Don't you know this ain't your neighborhood?" Eli stopped in front of his house, tilting his head slightly, as though listening to something they couldn't hear. "I know exactly where I am," he said quietly. The man's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second before he recovered. "What? You think you're special or something? Walking around here like you own the place. Ain't nobody gonna save you, ghost eyes." Eli remained still, his voice calm and steady. "I'm not looking for trouble, but if you bring it to me, you won't like what you find." The leader let out a bark of laughter, motioning for the others to surround him. "Oh, we're gonna like it just fine." The tension in the air thickened as the men closed in, their shadows swallowing the faint light. From inside the house, the old clock chimed once, the sound sharp and clear. Eli exhaled slowly, his grip shifting slightly on the cane. Trouble had come, just as he'd known it would, and he was ready. The leader stepped closer, his smirk widening as he scanned Eli. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue, blind boy? Or are you too scared to say something?" Eli's cane tapped the ground lightly, a soft, deliberate motion. He tilted his head slightly, his white eyes catching the dim light. "I don't have anything to say to you. You're on my property. Leave." The gang chuckled, their laughter bouncing off the quiet street. The leader turned to his men, grinning. "Hear that? Blind boy thinks he can tell us what to do." "Yeah, like he owns the whole block or something," one of them chimed in, a wiry man with jagged tattoos creeping up his neck. "Walking around here like he's better than us." Eli's grip tightened slightly on his cane, but his face remained calm. "I didn't say that. I just said you need to leave." The leader stepped closer, invading Eli's space. "You don't tell us what to do. This ain't your block anymore. It's Axel's." Eli's brow furrowed. Axel! Who's Axel? The leader scoffed, shaking his head. You don't know? Figures. Axel's the one who runs things around here now, and he don't like people like you hanging around where you don't belong. Eli tilted his head, his voice calm but firm. I've lived here for years. This is my home. The wiry man laughed harshly, spitting on the ground near Eli's feet. Not anymore. Axel's taken over, and he don't want no blind hero or his kind messing things up. Eli's jaw tightened. My kind? The leader grinned, leaning in close. Yeah, your kind. Always thinking you're better than the rest of us. But guess what? You're not. You're just another nobody who's gonna learn his place. Eli's stance shifted slightly, but his voice remained steady. I don't know Axel, and I don't care what he thinks he owns. This is my home, and I'm not going anywhere. The leader's face darkened, the grin replaced by a sneer. You don't care? You think Axel's the kind of man you just ignore? He's the reason we're here, blind boy. Sent us to make sure you got the message loud and clear. Eli's tone dropped, firm and resolute. You're done. Leave now, or you'll regret it. The gang exchanged glances, momentarily thrown by the unwavering confidence in his voice. But the leader quickly recovered, puffing out his chest. Regret it? What are you going to do? You can't even see us coming. One of the younger gang members hesitated, his eyes darting to the houses around them, where curtains twitched as neighbors peeked out. Boss, maybe we should... Shut it, the leader snapped, glaring at him. Ain't nobody coming out here to save him. They're all scared, just like he's about to be. Eli tilted his head again, his expression unreadable. They're not scared of me, and neither am I. The leader's lip curled in frustration. Big words from a man who can't see what's about to happen. You think you're tough? You ain't met Axel yet. He'll make sure you never walk these streets again. Eli's grip on his cane shifted slightly, his stance steady. If Axel wants to talk, he can come himself. You, though, you're done here. The leader let out a sharp, humorless laugh. You really think you're in charge, don't you? Boys, I think this blind fool needs a lesson. The gang closed in, their voices still mocking, but tinged with an edge of uncertainty. The tension was thick, the night air heavy with what was about to unfold. You hear him? Thinks he can talk down to us, one of the men sneered, his tattooed arms flexing as he cracked his knuckles. Like we're just gonna let some blind, black nobody tell us what to do. The wiry man grinned viciously, stepping closer. Yeah, you don't belong here, Ghost Eyes. Axel told us it's time to clean house. And guess who's first on the list? You. Blind. Black. And in the way. Eli remained still, his face unreadable, though his grip on the cane shifted ever so slightly. This is my home, he said, his voice low but steady. The leader sneered, leaning in closer. Your home? You're out of your mind. This block? This whole street? It's Axel's now. You're just squatters, taking up space where you don't belong. And we're here to make sure you get the message. Eli's head tilted slightly, his unseeing eyes fixed forward. A man who's afraid to face me himself doesn't own anything. That struck a nerve. The leader's sneer twisted into an angry snarl. You think Axel's afraid of you? Nah, he's just got better things to do than waste his time on some broken-down blind man who doesn't know when to shut up. Better things to do, the wiry man echoed mockingly. Yeah, like making sure this place is clean. And you're a stain that needs to be wiped out. Another member chimed in, his voice colder. You think you're tough, walking around like you're some kind of hero, but you're nothing. Just another leftover Axel's gonna sweep away. The leader jabbed a finger at Eli's chest. And we're here to do the sweeping. The gang circled tighter, their taunts growing louder, harsher. The leader's voice rose above the rest. You're not just blind. You're blind to reality. Nobody here's gonna save you. And you're sure as hell not saving yourself. Eli's stance shifted subtly, his head tilting slightly as though listening to something beyond the jeers. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but carried a weight that silenced their laughter. You've said enough. I warned you. Now, You'll learn the hard way." The leader barked another laugh, though it was tinged with irritation. "Big words, blind boy. Let's see you back them up." One of the men lunged first, a fist swinging toward Eli. With a sudden, fluid motion, Eli sidestepped, his cane snapping up to deflect the blow. The sharp crack echoed in the night, and the man stumbled back, clutching his arm. The others hesitated for a fraction of a second, surprised by the speed of Eli's reaction. The leader snarled, "What the hell are you waiting for? Take him down!" The fight had begun, and the tension exploded into chaos. The air snapped with tension as the first man lunged toward Eli, a clumsy fist swinging toward his face. Eli moved fluidly, instinct taking over. He pivoted on his heel, the punch slicing through empty air. Before the man could recover, Eli's cane struck his wrist with a sharp crack. The attacker yelped, stumbling back as pain shot up his arm. Eli didn't waste a moment. A second figure was already closing in from his left, and though his sight was faint, his other senses guided him. He caught the movement in his peripheral vision and stepped aside, his cane sweeping low and hooking behind the man's ankle. A swift tug sent the attacker sprawling to the ground, his head hitting the pavement with a dull thud. "Get him!" the wiry man barked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Eli's breathing was steady, his mind laser-focused. Years of Navy SEAL training had honed him into a weapon, a man who could fight even in the dark. His blindness wasn't a weakness. It was a challenge he had learned to master. The gang hesitated for only a moment before rushing as a group, their jeers turning into frustrated growls. Eli didn't falter. His world narrowed to sound and motion. The scrape of boots on gravel, the rush of air as fists swung toward him, the vibrations of the pavement under his feet. Two attackers came at him from opposite sides, trying to overwhelm him. Eli ducked low, letting their momentum carry them past him. His cane snapped upward into one man's stomach, the impact doubling him over with a gasp. Without pausing, Eli turned and drove an elbow into the second man's jaw, sending him staggering back. The leader snarled from behind the group, "Stop messing around! Put him down already!" Another man lunged, his arm outstretched to grab Eli, but Eli turned into the hold, twisting the attacker's wrist and using his momentum to flip him over. The man hit the ground with a groan, clutching his arm. Eli's ribs ached as a glancing kick connected, forcing him to stagger. The gang was adjusting, learning his movements, but Eli's training kept him ahead. He stepped back, steadying his breath. Pain was nothing new to him. On the battlefield, he'd faced worse. The wiry man circled warily, his confidence starting to waver. "Boss, he's not fighting like a regular guy. This guy's trained." The leader shoved him forward, his voice hard and furious. "Then stop fighting like regular guys and take him out." Eli heard the leader's heavy steps, moving closer with purpose. He adjusted his grip on the cane, shifting his stance slightly. "You're too loud," Eli said calmly, his voice cutting through the chaos. The leader lunged, but Eli's cane snapped upward, connecting with the side of his head. The leader stumbled back, clutching his temple. But the momentary success came with a cost. Another gang member slipped past Eli's defenses, landing a punch to his jaw. The impact was jarring, sending him staggering back a step. His world tilted briefly, but Eli steadied himself, tightening his grip on the cane. "You've already lost," Eli said, his tone even but resolute. The leader recovered, rubbing his head as he glared at Eli. "Not yet," he growled, motioning for the others. "Hit him from all sides. Don't let up." The gang roared in frustration, rushing in again. The night erupted into chaos, the fight far from over. The gang rushed Eli again, their shouts echoing through the still night. Eli steadied his breathing, his mind narrowing in on the sounds and vibrations around him. Years of Navy SEAL training came flooding back. Control, precision, efficiency. He wasn't just fighting. He was surviving. The first attacker came from his left, swinging a broken bottle in a wide arc. Eli caught the sound of glass cutting the air and stepped inside the swing, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting sharply. The bottle clattered to the ground as the man cried out, clutching his arm in pain. Eli followed with a swift strike to the side of his head, sending him to the pavement. Another rushed in from behind, but Eli felt the shift in the air and ducked just in time. A steel pipe whistled over his head, narrowly missing. Using the momentum of his duck, Eli spun low, his cane sweeping out to hook the attacker's legs. The man crashed to the ground, the pipe bouncing from his grip. The wiry man with the skull tattoo hesitated, his bravado starting to crack. "You can't keep this up, old man," he shouted, his voice trembling slightly. Eli turned his head toward him, his unseeing eyes calm and steady. "Try me." The wiry man hesitated for just a second too long. Eli closed the gap, his cane striking like a viper. A blow to the wrist sent the man's arm flailing, and a follow-up strike to the knee dropped him to the ground with a cry of pain. "Get him!" the leader bellowed, his voice tinged with frustration. "What's wrong with you? He's just one guy." Two of the remaining men charged together, their movements frantic and uncoordinated. Eli shifted, letting their wild swings miss as he countered with calculated precision. His elbow connected with one man's nose, a sickening crack accompanying his fall. The other caught a sharp jab to the ribs, doubling over just as Eli swept his cane across his back, dropping him beside his friend. The fight was chaos, but Eli's movements were deliberate, each strike calculated to disable and disarm. The leader cursed loudly, backing away as Eli turned toward him. "Twayor, you think you've won?" he shouted, his voice faltering. "Axel's not gonna let this slide. You'll see." The wiry man scrambled to his feet, clutching his bruised knee. "I'm not sticking around for this," he yelled, limping away into the shadows. Another man followed, dragging his injured friend, their retreat marked by muttered curses and pained groans. Eli stood still for a moment, listening to the sounds of their retreat. The leader, now alone with two others lying groaning on the ground, glared at Eli with fury and frustration. "You've made a big mistake, old man," he growled, backing away slowly. "Axel's gonna hear about this, and when he does, you're done." Eli didn't move, his stance steady, his grip firm on the cane. His voice was calm, unshaken. "I'll be waiting." The leader spat on the ground, then turned and disappeared into the night, leaving his injured men behind. Eli took a deep breath, his senses still sharp, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear the faint rustle of curtains as neighbors peeked out, the quiet tension hanging heavy in the air. The fight was over. For now. The quiet after the fight was sharp, the faint sound of retreating footsteps fading into the distance. Eli stood still for a moment, his breathing steady as he assessed his surroundings. His senses, honed by years of training, picked up every detail. The groans of pain from the men on the ground, the rustle of curtains as neighbors watched from the safety of their homes, the metallic tang of blood in the air. He turned toward the two injured men lying on the pavement, their bodies twisted in pain. Slowly, deliberately, he walked over to the first, his cane tapping softly against the ground with each step. The man tried to scramble backward, but his injured leg refused to cooperate. "Stay back!" he croaked, his voice trembling. Eli stopped, tilting his head slightly. His white, glassy eyes seemed to look straight through the man. "Who is Axel?" he asked, his tone low and commanding. The man clutched his knee, his face pale. I don't know much, man. He's just the boss. He tells us what to do." Eli crouched down slowly, bringing himself to the man's level. His voice dropped further, ice lacing his words. "That's not good enough. What does he want with this neighborhood? Why did he send you here?" The man swallowed hard, his eyes darting around as though searching for an escape. "He wants control. He wants to own the whole block. Businesses, houses, everything. He said people like you're in the way." Eli's jaw tightened, and he leaned in closer. "People like me, blind and black. Is that it?" The man flinched, his lips trembling. I didn't mean..." Eli cut him off sharply. You came to my home. You brought this fight. You don't get to hide behind excuses now. Tell me where to find Axel. The second man groaned from a few feet away, trying to push himself up on one arm. Eli turned his attention toward him, standing and walking over with measured steps. You, Eli said, his voice sharp. Where does Axel operate? Speak, the second man coughed, spitting blood onto the pavement. Warehouse. Near the docks. He runs things from there. But you're crazy if you think you can take him on. He'll kill you. Eli crouched again, his expression unreadable. He sent you here thinking I was weak. I think he's the one who underestimated me. The first man whimpered, his fear palpable. Look, man, just let us go. We're done, okay? We won't come back. Eli's voice hardened. You'll go when I decide you're done. He stood and turned toward his house. Stay here. Don't try anything. The men exchanged panicked glances but were too injured to move. Eli disappeared inside his home for a moment, emerging with a coil of rope slung over one shoulder. The first man's eyes widened in terror. What are you going to do with that? Eli didn't respond immediately, his steps measured as he approached. You came here to send a message. Now, you're going to help me send one back. The men squirmed, their protests weak and uncoordinated, as Eli knelt to tie their hands behind their backs. His movements were calm, deliberate, every knot secure. The quiet neighborhood seemed to hold its breath as Eli worked, the groans of the injured men the only sounds breaking the silence. Once they were restrained, Eli stood over them, his figure silhouetted by the faint streetlights. Now, he said, his voice low and unyielding, you're going to tell me everything I need to know about Axel. Eli tightened the last knot on the ropes binding the two men before grabbing the loose ends and pulling them to their feet. They stumbled, groaning from their injuries, as he guided them toward his house. Wait! What are you doing? The wiry man asked, his voice shaking. You can't just take us inside. Eli didn't answer, his steps firm and unyielding. His focus was absolute. Once inside, the room was dimly lit, its sparse furniture casting long shadows against the walls. Eli maneuvered the men to a wooden chair and forced them to sit down, tying them securely to it. The silence of the house was oppressive, broken only by their labored breathing. Look, the first man said, struggling against the ropes. Just call the cops, man. We'll tell them everything, okay? Just let them handle it. Eli paused, standing over them, his white eyes unreadable. Call the cops? He repeated, his tone almost mocking. That's convenient. Coming from you. Yeah, man, the wiry one blurted out, his voice cracking. They'll handle this. You don't gotta do anything else. We'll tell them about Axel. Just let us go, all right? Eli tilted his head slightly, his expression calm but cold. If you're scared of the police, you shouldn't have come here in the first place. But something tells me you're not scared of the cops. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping. You're scared of me. The first man swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing visibly. We'll talk, okay? Just don't hurt us. Eli's voice remained steady, unshaken. You'll talk, but not to the police. Not yet. First, you're going to tell me everything I need to know about Axel. His operations, his plans, everything. The wiry man squirmed, his eyes darting around the room. What do you even want with Axel? You don't know who you're messing with, man. He runs everything. The warehouses, the streets. He's got guys everywhere. Eli crossed his arms, standing tall over them. Good. Then start with the warehouses. How many? Where are they? And what's inside them? The first man's resolve broke, his voice spilling out in a rush. There's a main one by the docks. That's where Axel stays most of the time. It's got everything. Money, drugs, weapons. He uses it to control the whole block. If you're in his way, he sends guys like us to deal with you. Eli nodded slowly, his expression giving nothing away. And who else works for him? How many men does he have? The wiry man shook his head frantically. A lot. Too many for you to handle alone. If you go after him, you're a dead man. You don't know what he'll do to you. Eli leaned in closer, his face inches from the man's. "That's not your concern. What else?" The first man hesitated, his lips trembling. "Look, man, we don't know everything, okay? We're just small time. Axel tells us what to do, and we do it. That's it. We don't get involved in the bigger stuff." Eli studied them for a long moment, his silence heavy. Then he straightened, his voice firm. "You've given me enough for now, but don't think you're off the hook." "What are you gonna do with us?" the wiry man asked, his voice cracking with fear. Eli's face was unreadable as he turned away, heading toward a nearby table. "That depends. If I think you're lying, you'll wish the police were your problem." The two men exchanged panicked glances, their breathing ragged. The atmosphere in the room was suffocating, the weight of Eli's presence pressing down on them. "You're insane," the first man whispered, his voice barely audible. Eli turned back to face them, his stance calm, his voice resolute. "No, I'm a man protecting his home. Axel made a mistake coming after me. And so did you." Eli stood silently for a moment, the room heavy with the sound of the two men's labored breathing. Their eyes darted nervously, tracking his every movement as he pulled open a nearby drawer. What are you doing now?" the wiry man stammered, straining against his bonds. Eli didn't answer immediately. From the drawer, he retrieved two large plain canvas bags. He held one up briefly before speaking, his voice calm and deliberate. "You wanted to send a message. Now, you're going to help me send one back." "No, man, come on!" the wiry man yelped, wriggling harder in his chair. "You don't have to do this. We told you what you wanted." Eli's expression was unreadable as he approached. "And now, I'm making sure Axel knows the consequences of coming after me." The other man froze, wide-eyed. "Please, man, just call the cops. We'll talk to them. Eli cut him off, his tone sharp. "The cops don't scare Axel, but this will." Without another word, he pulled the first bag over the wiry man's head. The man's muffled protests filled the room, frantic and desperate. Eli moved to the other man and did the same, ignoring their writhing. Once their heads were covered, Eli untied the ropes binding them to the chairs, keeping their hands securely tied behind their backs. He pulled them to their feet, his movements firm and controlled. "Move!" he ordered, his voice cold and commanding. The men stumbled, blind and disoriented, as Eli guided them toward the door. Outside, the air was cool, the quiet street illuminated by the pale glow of a flickering lamppost. Eli led them to the base of the lamppost and forced them to sit. He worked quickly, tying their ankles together and securing them tightly to the metal pole. "Please," one of them whimpered from beneath the bag. "We're done, okay? We won't come back." Eli stood over them, his voice steady and unyielding. "Good, because if I see you on this street again, this will seem like mercy." The men fell silent, their breaths ragged and shallow. Eli turned, his steps measured, as he walked back toward his house. The neighborhood was still, though he could feel the eyes of neighbors watching from behind their curtains. He didn't need to see them to know they'd witnessed everything. Inside, Eli locked the door and paused, taking a deep breath. He leaned against the counter for a moment, his mind already working. The information he'd extracted replayed in his head. The warehouse by the docks, Axel's control over the area, the weapons and resources he had at his disposal. This wasn't just about him anymore. Axel's operations threatened the entire neighborhood, and Eli couldn't let that stand. He moved to the table and spread out a large sheet of paper, sketching a rough map of the docks from memory. Every movement was calculated, every line deliberate. Years of Navy SEAL training had taught him the value of preparation. If Axel was expecting fear, he would find the opposite. Eli's jaw tightened as he marked the location of the warehouse. Tonight had been a warning. The real fight was just beginning. Eli sat at his kitchen table, running his hands over the map he'd sketched. The faint shapes and lines his vision allowed were enough to recall the fight from earlier. Shadows of movement, bursts of sound, and the raw vibrations of bodies hitting the pavement. His thoughts lingered on the information the gang members had revealed. A warehouse, at the docks. Axel's operation was far larger than he had imagined. This wasn't just about a group of thugs attacking his home. It was a calculated effort to control the entire neighborhood. Eli knew his skills could take him far, but the fight had also revealed his limits. His eyes were no longer his strongest tool, and for the first time since the attack, he admitted he couldn't do this alone. The next evening, Eli made his way to Maya's diner. The streets were quiet, the faint hum of distant cars the only sound. He relied on his cane to navigate the cracks and uneven pavement, but his ears, and what little he could see, a vague glow of street lights and shadowy outlines, kept him aware of his surroundings. The bell above the diner door jingled softly as he entered. The smell of coffee and frying bacon wafted through the air, comforting in its familiarity. Maya looked up from behind the counter, her brows furrowing in concern. "Eli?" she asked, walking over to meet him. "What are you doing out so late?" "I need your help," Eli said, his tone quiet but firm. Maya led him to a booth, glancing over her shoulder to make sure no one was eavesdropping. Once seated, she leaned forward. "What's going on?" Eli rested his hands on the table. "There's a man named Axel trying to take over this neighborhood. He's running more than just a street gang. He's targeting homes, businesses, everything. And he's operating out of a warehouse by the docks." Maya blinked in surprise. "Axel? I've never heard that name before. How do you know all this?" Eli's face was calm, his voice steady. "The men who came after me told me. They were working for him." Maya's brow furrowed. "Came after you? What happened?" "They attacked me," Eli said simply. "They thought I'd be an easy target." "They were wrong." Maya's eyes widened. "Eli, you should have told someone. You can't handle this on your own." "I know," Eli interrupted. "That's why I'm here. I need help, Maya. This isn't just about me. If Axel isn't stopped, he'll take over everything we've worked to build here." Maya nodded slowly, though her worry didn't fade. "Okay, what do you need?" "People I can trust," Eli said. "People who care about this neighborhood as much as I do. They don't need to fight. They just need to help me gather information." Maya tapped her fingers against the table, thinking, "All right, I know some folks who might step up. Jenkins from the hardware store. He's always hated the gang harassing his customers. Angie at the laundromat, too. She keeps her ear to the ground, hears everything that happens around here." "That's a good start," Eli said. "We need to find out everything we can about Axel. How many men he has, what they're guarding, their routines. The more we know, the better we can prepare." By the next evening, Eli's living room was filled with a small group of neighbors. Maya had brought Jenkins, a wiry older man with a weathered face, and Angie, a sharp-eyed woman who exuded quiet confidence. "So what's this about, Eli?" Jenkins asked, leaning against the wall. "Maya said you've got a problem that needs fixing." Eli nodded. "There's a man named Axel. He's running an operation out of a warehouse by the docks. Drugs, weapons, money. He's trying to take over this neighborhood, and we're in his way." Angie crossed her arms. "Never heard of this Axel before." "You sure about this?" "I'm sure," Eli said firmly. "The men who attacked me work for him. They said Axel's trying to control everything. Our homes, our businesses, all of it. If we wait, he'll tighten his grip until it's too late to stop him." Jenkins frowned. "And what do you expect us to do?" "We're not fighters, Eli." "You don't have to fight," Eli replied. "But I need eyes and ears. We need to gather information. How many men Axel has, what their routines are, where the weak points in his operation might be." Maya nodded. "If we can figure that out, we can hit him where it hurts, without putting everyone at risk." Jenkins sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I've got some old equipment I can rig up. Something to cause a ruckus if we need to distract them. And I can spread the word quietly," Angie added. "People talk when they think no one's listening." Eli leaned forward, his voice calm but resolute. "This isn't just about me. It's about all of us. Axel thinks he can take what he wants. We need to show him he's wrong." The group exchanged glances, the weight of the fight ahead settling over them. Slowly they nodded, their resolve building. Eli stood in his living room, the faint outlines of the gathered neighbors just visible in the dim light. The map of the docks lay on the coffee table, surrounded by scraps of paper and small tools Jenkins had brought from his hardware store. The air was thick with tension, but also a growing sense of purpose. "All right," Eli said, his tone calm but firm. "First step is gathering information. We need eyes on that warehouse. Shift changes, deliveries, any patterns we can exploit." Angie leaned over the map, squinting at the rough lines. "There's a back alley here," she said, pointing to a section near the warehouse. "I've seen some of their trucks going in and out. I can stake it out. See what I can learn." Jenkins nodded. "And I can rig some of these," he said, holding up a bundle of old car alarms. "Set 'em off when we need to pull their attention away." "That's good," Eli said, nodding. "We'll also need to make sure no one in the neighborhood tips them off. Axel's men don't trust easily, but someone desperate enough might sell us out." Maya crossed her arms. "I'll handle that. People talk to me at the diner. I can make sure the wrong ears don't hear anything." The room was quiet for a moment, the gravity of their mission sinking in. Then Angie broke the silence. "Look, I get that we're doing this, but shouldn't we get the police involved? If Axel's running drugs and weapons, they're the ones who should be taking him down, not us." Eli turned his head slightly toward her, his white eyes catching the faint light. "The police?" His voice was calm, but the edge in his tone was unmistakable. "Yes," Angie pressed. "This is their job, isn't it? Why risk ourselves when we could just tip them off?" Eli exhaled slowly, his expression hardening. "You think they don't know?" Angie frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "They know," Eli said, his voice steady but firm. "They know exactly what's happening, but they won't do anything about it. Either they're on Axel's payroll, or they're too scared to get involved. Either way, the police are useless to us." Jenkins leaned back against the wall, nodding grimly. "He's not wrong. I've seen Axel's guys hanging around the precinct. They're bold because they know no one's coming for them." Angie hesitated, glancing at Maya. "So it's really just us?" "It's always been just us," Maya said quietly. "But that's why we're doing this. If we don't fight back, no one will." Eli leaned forward, his hands resting on the table. "We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for everyone in this neighborhood who's too scared to stand up. If Axel wins, he won't stop until he's taken everything. We can't let that happen." The room fell silent again, but this time it was filled with a quiet resolve. Angie nodded slowly, her expression firming. "All right. What's the next step?" Eli tapped the map. "We work in shifts. Jenkins, rig the distractions near the alley. Angie, watch the warehouse and track their movements. Maya, keep the neighborhood calm and make sure no one gets suspicious. I'll coordinate everything and step in when it's time to act." "Got it," Jenkins said, already sorting through his tools. "Let's get to work," Maya added, standing with purpose. The group dispersed, their quiet determination filling the room as they began their preparations. Eli stood still for a moment, listening to the faint sounds of movement and conversation. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, they had a plan. The following days were a blur of quiet activity. Eli remained at the center of it all, coordinating their efforts while the team worked tirelessly. His damaged vision made details difficult, but his finely tuned senses and sharp instincts kept him aware of their progress. Jenkins had set up his distractions, an assortment of old car alarms rigged to trip at the press of a remote. "They're crude," Jenkins admitted, as he showed Eli how to trigger them. "But they'll make enough noise to draw attention." "They don't have to be perfect," Eli replied. "They just need to create confusion." At the same time, Angie began her surveillance. From the safety of a boarded-up building near the docks, she tracked the movements around Axel's warehouse. She kept meticulous notes, recording shift changes, delivery times, and the size of Axel's crew. One evening, she sat in the diner with Maya and Eli, sharing what she'd learned. "They're well organized," Angie said, tapping her notebook. "About 12 to 15 men rotate through the warehouse, 2 shifts every 12 hours. The most activity happens around 10 p.m. That's when the trucks come in." "Trucks?" Eli asked, leaning forward. Angie nodded. "Big ones. I couldn't see what they were carrying, but if I had to guess, I'd say it's drugs or weapons. Whatever it is, they unload it fast and get it inside. Eli processed the information, his mind already working on how to use it to their advantage. Good. We'll use the distractions to create chaos during their busiest time. If we can divide their attention, we'll have an opening to get inside. Maya frowned, glancing at Angie. What about Axel? Did you see him? Angie shook her head. No, but his men talk about him. They're scared of him. And from what I overheard, he's in and out of the warehouse all the time. He's not just hiding behind his crew. He's involved. Eli's expression hardened. That makes him predictable. If he's there regularly, we can anticipate his movements. As the plan came together, the group began to work like a well-oiled machine. Maya spread word discreetly through the neighborhood, ensuring no one tipped Axel's men off. Jenkins tested his devices, setting them in key locations around the docks. Angie refined her notes, identifying potential weak points in the warehouse's defenses. Eli spent hours reviewing the map and preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Though he trusted his team, he knew the most dangerous part of the plan rested on his shoulders. "You've got to let us help you more," Maya said one evening as she watched him work. "You can't take all this on yourself." "I'm not doing it alone," Eli replied. "But if Axel shows up, he'll come for me. I need to be ready for that." Maya hesitated, her worry evident. "You know they'll outnumber you." "They'll underestimate me," Eli said, his tone calm but resolute. "That's always been their mistake." By the end of the week, everything was in place. The map on Eli's table was marked with detailed notes, every route and distraction planned meticulously. The team gathered one last time to review the plan. "Angie will signal when the trucks arrive," Eli explained. "Jenkins, you'll set off the distractions to draw the guards away. Maya, you'll stay here and keep watch over the neighborhood. Once the warehouse is vulnerable, I'll go in." "And do what?" Jenkins asked, his tone skeptical. "You can't just take the whole place down on your own." "I'm not," Eli said. "I'm going to find Axel and force him to shut this down. Once he's gone, his crew will scatter." Angie exchanged a glance with Jenkins. "And if Axel doesn't cooperate?" Eli's expression was unreadable, his voice steady. "Then I'll make sure he can't hurt anyone else." The room fell silent, the weight of what lay ahead settling over them. Finally, Maya broke the silence. "We'll be ready." Eli nodded. "Good. This neighborhood has stood strong for decades. Axel won't take it from us. Not while we're still here." The group dispersed, their determination solidified. Eli remained at the table, his fingers brushing the map as he reviewed the plan one last time. The fight ahead would be his most dangerous yet, but he wasn't backing down. The night was quiet as Eli stood in the shadows near the docks, the cool breeze carrying the faint scent of salt water and oil. His ears picked up the low hum of a truck engine in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Angie's signal, a faint series of knocks on the boarded-up window of her hideout, confirmed that the trucks were arriving, right on schedule. Eli adjusted his stance, his cane resting lightly in his hand. He couldn't see the details of the truck, but the blurry glow of its headlights was enough to guide his focus. He listened carefully, tracking the movements of the men unloading crates. "Jenkins," Eli said, into the small radio clipped to his jacket, his voice barely above a whisper. "Here," Jenkins replied, his voice crackling through the speaker. "Start the first distraction." "Got it." A moment later, the piercing wail of a car alarm shattered the stillness. Shouts erupted from the warehouse as the guards scrambled to investigate. Eli used the commotion to creep closer, moving silently along the perimeter of the building. From her vantage point, Angie watched the chaos unfold. A group of guards rushed toward the source of the noise, their flashlights cutting through the dark. She spoke softly into her own radio. 6 of them heading west. That leaves 5 at the entrance." Eli nodded to himself, calculating his next move. "Jenkins, trigger the second one." Another alarm blared, this time from the opposite direction. The remaining guards hesitated, torn between investigating the new sound or staying at their posts. "Now's your chance," Angie whispered. Eli moved swiftly, his steps measured and quiet. His limited vision caught the faint outlines of crates and equipment stacked near the entrance, providing cover as he approached. He crouched low, listening intently to the guards' hurried footsteps. Inside the warehouse, the air was thick with the scent of wood and gasoline. The faint outlines of crates loomed around him, casting long shadows under the dim overhead lights. Eli's ears picked up muffled voices deeper inside. Axel's men were distracted, trying to figure out the source of the commotion. He moved with practiced precision, navigating the cluttered space as if it were second nature. His training was sharper than his vision. Every sound, every vibration told him where he was and what lay ahead. Eli froze as he heard footsteps approaching. A single guard making a sweep near the entrance. He crouched behind a crate, gripping his cane tightly. As the guard passed, Eli sprang into action, his movements swift and deliberate. The cane struck the guard's knee, dropping him with a muffled groan. Eli delivered a quick blow to the man's head, ensuring he stayed down. "Eli!" Angie's voice crackled in his ear. "I see two more heading toward the loading area. That might leave Axel alone inside." "Understood," Eli replied, his voice steady. He pressed deeper into the warehouse, navigating the maze of crates and equipment. Faint voices echoed ahead, growing louder as he approached. "You idiots can't handle one night without screwing things up?" a deep voice barked. Eli's jaw tightened. That voice! It had to be Axel. He moved closer, his steps silent, until he reached a vantage point where he could make out the blurred figure of a tall man standing near a desk. Axel's posture was commanding, his voice sharp as he berated one of his men. Eli crouched low, taking a deep breath. This was the moment he'd been preparing for. The neighborhood's survival depended on what happened next. Eli crouched behind a stack of crates, the scent of oil and wood thick in the warehouse air. His head tilted slightly, his unseeing eyes scanning the faint blurs of movement ahead. The distant voices of Axel's men echoed through the cavernous space. "Get it together!" one of them barked. "Find out what's setting off those alarms." Eli exhaled slowly, centering himself. The chaos outside was working. Jenkins's distractions had drawn most of the guards away, leaving fewer to deal with inside. But fewer wasn't none. If Eli wanted to get to Axel, he had to take out the remaining guards, one by one. The first guard came around the corner, his footsteps heavy and uncoordinated. Eli stayed perfectly still, tracking the faint sound of the man's breathing as he passed by. When the guard was just a few steps ahead, Eli struck. His cane swept low, hooking the guard's ankle and yanking it out from under him. The man hit the ground with a thud, and before he could cry out, Eli delivered a swift blow to his temple, knocking him unconscious. Eli dragged the man into the shadows, ensuring he was out of sight before moving on. The next two guards were stationed near the loading bay, their figures blurry but distinct as they stood under the dim overhead lights. Eli crept closer, using the stacks of crates for cover. "You think it's just some punks messing with us?" one of the guards asked, his voice laced with irritation. "Who knows?" the other replied. "But if Axel finds out we didn't deal with it, he's gonna have our heads." Eli smirked faintly. Fear of Axel. That was the gang's common thread. He intended to turn that fear against them. He moved quickly, closing the distance before they realized he was there. The first guard barely had time to react as Eli's cane struck the back of his knee, sending him to the ground. The second guard swung wildly, but Eli sidestepped, his cane connecting with the man's wrist and disarming him of the small blade he carried. A sharp jab to the ribs dropped the second guard, leaving both incapacitated. Eli stepped back, his breathing steady, listening for any sign that the commotion had drawn attention. The sound of footsteps echoed nearby. Another guard, moving cautiously, his weapon drawn. Eli pressed against the crates, waiting for the man to pass. "You see anything?" the guard called out, his voice tense. Eli didn't respond, letting the silence stretch. The guard hesitated, his breathing quickening. "Come on, don't play games." Eli moved behind him, his steps silent. When he was close enough, he struck, using his cane to knock the weapon from the guard's hands. The man swung around, but Eli anticipated the movement, catching his arm and twisting it sharply. The guard cried out, dropping to his knees. "Stay quiet," Eli said coldly, releasing the man and delivering a quick blow to the back of his head, knocking him out. With the guards neutralized, the warehouse was eerily quiet. Eli straightened, tilting his head as he listened for any remaining movement. A faint sound, Axel's voice, came from deeper inside, sharp and angry. "You useless idiots! How hard is it to keep one place under control?" Axel bellowed. Eli's grip on his cane tightened. He moved toward the sound, his steps deliberate. Each vibration, each faint blur of light and shadow guided him closer. As he approached the center of the warehouse, the space opened up into a wide loading area. Axel's figure loomed ahead, standing near a desk cluttered with papers and weapons. Eli paused, staying in the shadows. There were still 2 guards flanking Axel, their postures tense as he berated them. Eli needed to deal with them first before the confrontation could truly begin. He crouched low, creeping around the edge of the room. His breath was steady, his movements calculated. This was what he'd trained for: precision and patience. One of the guards moved slightly away from Axel, his footsteps echoing faintly. Eli saw his chance. He struck quickly, his cane sweeping upward to knock the guard's weapon away before landing a sharp blow to his ribs. The man crumpled, a groan escaping his lips. The second guard turned, raising his own weapon, but Eli closed the distance in a heartbeat. He disarmed the man with a swift strike to his wrist, then followed with a knee to the man's chest, sending him to the ground. Axel turned, his face twisting in fury as he took in the scene. "Who the hell?" Eli straightened, his figure emerging from the shadows, his white, glassy eyes fixed on Axel's blurred outline. "It's over," Eli said, his voice steady. Axel sneered, his stance shifting as he reached for a blade on the desk. "You think you can just walk in here and take me down? You're more blind than I thought." Eli's grip on his cane tightened. The final confrontation was inevitable. Axel's eyes narrowed as Eli stepped closer, his presence calm but unyielding. The chaos of the warehouse had settled into an uneasy silence, broken only by Axel's heavy breathing. "You've got some nerve walking in here," Axel growled, his voice thick with fury. "Do you even understand where you are? What you're dealing with?" Eli tilted his head slightly, his cane resting lightly against the ground. "I know exactly where I am, and I know who you are. A man who thinks he can take whatever he wants, because no one's willing to stop him." Axel barked a humorless laugh, his posture tense with barely contained rage. "You don't stop someone like me. You don't even slow me down. I've built this from the ground up, and you think you're gonna tear it down? Blind? Broken? And useless?" Eli's voice was steady, cutting through Axel's rant. "You're losing control, Axel. If you weren't, you wouldn't be here screaming at your own men for letting this happen." Axel's expression darkened, and his fists clenched at his sides. "They're idiots," he spat, glaring at the unconscious guards scattered around the warehouse. "They let a cripple walk in here and make fools out of them. But that doesn't change anything. You don't belong here. Never have, never will." Eli's jaw tightened, his tone sharp. "This isn't about me. It's about the people in this neighborhood. The ones you think you can push around, steal from, and control." Axel sneered, taking a step forward. "The people in this neighborhood? You mean your kind, always whining, always playing the victim, always looking for someone else to blame for why you can't get ahead." Eli's grip on his cane tightened, but his expression remained calm. "This isn't about blame, it's about justice, and that's something you'll never understand." Axel slammed his hand down on the desk, his voice rising. "Justice? You think you're some kind of hero? You're nothing. Just a blind black fool who doesn't know when he's outmatched." "You're right about one thing," Eli said, his voice low and deliberate. "I am blind, but that doesn't stop me from seeing exactly what you are. A coward hiding behind hate because you're too weak to lead without it." Axel's face twisted with rage, his sneer deepening. You think you're better than me? Better than my men? You're all the same. You act tough, but when someone like me steps in, you fold, every time. Eli took a slow step forward, his presence unwavering. The only one folding here is you. Your men are scattered. Your operation is exposed, and now you're alone. You've already lost, Axel. The only question is how far you're willing to fall before you admit it. Axel growled, his fury boiling over as he grabbed a crowbar from the desk. You think this is over? It's not over until I say it is. Eli adjusted his stance, his cane ready in his grip. The confrontation was about to explode into violence, but his focus remained sharp. Then say it, he said calmly. Axel let out a roar, charging toward Eli, his weapon raised high. Axel charged at Eli, the crowbar in his hand gleaming faintly under the warehouse's dim lights. His roar was guttural, filled with rage and frustration. Eli braced himself, his senses sharpening as he tracked the vibrations of Axel's heavy footsteps and the faint outline of his swinging weapon. The crowbar came down hard, but Eli sidestepped at the last moment, the metal striking the ground with a deafening clang. Axel recovered quickly, swinging again in a wide arc. Eli raised his cane, blocking the blow with a sharp, resounding crack. You're fast, Axel spat, his breath ragged. But that's all you've got. Eli didn't respond, his focus locked on the rhythm of Axel's movements. He could feel the power in every swing, the raw aggression Axel poured into each attack. It was relentless, forcing Eli to stay on the defensive, dodging and parrying as the crowbar came at him from every angle. Axel swung low, aiming for Eli's legs. Eli jumped back, but his balance wavered as the edge of the crowbar grazed his shin. The pain was sharp, and he gritted his teeth, steadying himself. Not so untouchable now, huh? Axel taunted, his grin widening. Eli adjusted his grip on the cane, his breathing measured. You talk too much. He lunged forward, his cane striking Axel's wrist with precise force. The crowbar slipped from Axel's grasp, clattering to the floor. Eli didn't give him a chance to recover, following up with a strike to Axel's side. The blow forced a grunt from Axel, but he retaliated with a brutal punch to Eli's ribs, sending him stumbling back. Eli's world spun for a moment, his limited vision blurring further as pain shot through his torso. He steadied himself, listening intently for Axel's next move. You don't belong here, Axel shouted, his voice echoing through the warehouse. He lunged, tackling Eli with raw strength. The two men hit the ground hard, the impact jarring. Axel's weight pressed down on Eli as he swung his fists, aiming for Eli's face. Eli blocked the blows as best he could, his arms absorbing the brunt of the attack. He twisted his body, using his legs to shift Axel's weight and roll them over. Now, on top, Eli landed a sharp elbow to Axel's jaw, the crack of bone reverberating through the room. Axel roared in pain, shoving Eli off with surprising strength. Both men scrambled to their feet, breathing heavily. Eli could feel the ache in his ribs and the sting of cuts on his arms. But his focus didn't waver. You don't know when to quit, Axel growled, grabbing a nearby chain from the ground. He swung it in a wide arc, the metal whistling through the air. Eli ducked, the chain narrowly missing his head. He moved quickly, closing the distance before Axel could swing again. His cane struck Axel's hand, forcing him to drop the chain. But Axel's knee came up suddenly, slamming into Eli's stomach and sending him staggering backward. You think you're some kind of hero? Axel snarled, advancing with his fists raised. You're just a blind fool who doesn't know when he's beat. Eli steadied himself, his cane raised defensively. His breath came in controlled bursts, his mind racing. Axel was strong and unpredictable, but his rage made him sloppy. Eli could use that. The two men clashed again, Axel's fists swinging wildly while Eli countered with precise strikes. Every hit Axel landed took its toll, the bruises and cuts adding up. But Eli's training kept him on his feet. Each of his movements was calculated, designed to wear Axel down and exploit his growing frustration. The fight raged on, brutal and unrelenting, neither man giving an inch. Axel's shouts and the sound of blows echoed through the warehouse, the tension thick enough to cut. Eli's senses remained sharp, his body moving instinctively as the battle pressed on. He could feel the end approaching, but Axel wasn't finished yet. Axel swung his fists again, wild but powerful. Each movement was driven by rage, his body a blur of raw aggression. Eli dodged, his breath coming in sharp bursts as he circled Axel, searching for an opening. "You think this is over?" Axel snarled, his voice echoing through the warehouse. "My men are coming back. You think a couple of distractions are enough to stop them? They'll be here any minute, and when they find you, they'll tear you apart." Eli didn't respond, his focus locked on the vibrations of Axel's movements. He could feel the strain in his body, every bruise and cut screaming for him to stop. But he pushed through. This had to end now. Axel lunged, grabbing a heavy crate from a nearby stack and hurling it toward Eli. The crash of wood splintering filled the room as Eli ducked, narrowly avoiding the debris. He felt the air shift as Axel closed in again, his footsteps pounding against the concrete. "You're just one man," Axel spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "Blind, weak, and alone. You really think you can stop me? I own this place. I own this neighborhood." Eli steadied himself, his grip on the cane firm. "Not anymore." Axel charged, his arms swinging in wide arcs. Eli dodged the first blow, then the second, his movements tight and controlled. But Axel's strength was relentless, his fists connecting with Eli's shoulder and ribs. The impact sent Eli staggering, pain flaring through his body. "You can't win," Axel roared, his confidence surging as he pressed the attack. "You're nothing without your sight. You're nothing, period." Eli exhaled sharply, his mind racing. Axel's strength and aggression were overwhelming, but his movements were predictable. He was relying on brute force, not strategy. Eli knew he had one chance to end this, but it would require a calculated risk. Axel swung again, his fists aiming for Eli's chest. Instead of dodging, Eli stepped into the attack, using his cane to deflect the blow just enough to lessen its impact. Axel's momentum carried him forward, and Eli struck. Using all the force he could muster, Eli drove his cane into Axel's midsection. The blow was precise, targeting the solar plexus and knocking the wind out of him. Axel staggered back, gasping for air, his arms flailing. Eli didn't let up. He moved quickly, his cane sweeping Axel's legs out from under him. Axel crashed to the ground, the sound reverberating through the warehouse. "You're done," Eli said, his voice steady but firm. Axel groaned, his body writhing as he tried to push himself up. "My men, they'll kill you," he rasped, his voice weak but defiant. Eli stepped closer, his cane raised. "Your men are scattered. Your operation is finished, and you're not walking out of here." With one final calculated strike, Eli brought the cane down on Axel's shoulder, the blow precise and debilitating. Axel cried out, his body collapsing back to the ground. The warehouse fell silent, the echoes of the brutal fight fading into stillness. Eli stood over Axel, his breathing heavy, his grip on the cane steady despite the pain coursing through him. "You lost," Eli said, his voice low and resolute. "This neighborhood doesn't belong to you. It never did." Axel groaned again, his strength spent. He lay motionless, his defeat unmistakable. Eli turned his head slightly, listening. The distant sound of Jenkins's car alarm distractions still echoed faintly outside. Axel's men wouldn't be back for a while, giving him enough time to finish what he needed to do. Eli stood over Axel's crumpled form, his breathing ragged but controlled. The faint hum of the radio clipped to his jacket crackled to life. "Eli," Angie's voice came through, tense but urgent. "The alarms won't hold them much longer. You've got maybe 5 minutes before they're back in full force." Eli exhaled, his mind racing. He glanced toward the desk where Axel had been shouting earlier. Though his vision was limited, He could make out the faint outlines of papers scattered across the surface, the blurred edges of what might be a ledger or a map. Evidence. "Understood," Eli replied into the radio, his voice calm despite the urgency. "Hold your position. I'll send what I can. Be quick," Angie added. Eli moved to the desk, his cane tapping lightly against the floor as he navigated the debris. His fingers brushed over the papers, identifying them by touch. Some were lists, names, addresses, numbers. Others were receipts and shipping manifests, their weight and texture distinct. He grabbed as much as he could, folding the documents carefully before slipping them into his jacket pocket. His hand moved to the edge of the desk, where he found a small recording device. He pressed the buttons experimentally, hearing a faint click followed by Axel's voice. "The shipments go out every Thursday at 10 p.m. The recording played, Axel's tone cold and commanding. "Don't mess this up. We've got buyers lined up, and I don't want any delays." Eli stopped the playback, pocketing the device. It was enough to implicate Axel and disrupt his operations. The radio crackled again. "Eli, you've got 2 trucks heading back your way," Jenkins warned, his voice tight. "They're gonna be on you in less than 3 minutes." Eli turned toward the warehouse exit, his grip on the cane firm. "Acknowledged," he said. Axel groaned from the floor, his voice weak but venomous. "You think this changes anything? My men will tear you apart." Eli crouched next to him, his tone even but sharp. "You lost, Axel. Your men won't save you, and by the time they realize what's happened, your operation will be gone." Axel's glare was filled with hatred, but he couldn't muster a response. Eli moved swiftly toward the side entrance of the warehouse, every step calculated. His limited sight caught the faint glow of headlights approaching in the distance. Time was running out. He reached the door and stepped outside, the cool night air a stark contrast to the tense heat of the warehouse. He pulled the small pouch he'd prepared earlier from his jacket and secured the evidence inside. "Angie," he said into the radio, "I'm dropping the package at the rendezvous. Make sure it gets to Maya." "On it," Angie replied. Eli placed the pouch in a concealed spot near the loading bay, ensuring it would be picked up safely. He turned back toward the warehouse, his senses sharp. The sound of engines grew louder, the vibrations in the ground signaling the imminent arrival of Axel's men. He tapped the radio again. "Jenkins, are the fallback distractions ready?" "They're set," Jenkins replied. "I'll trigger them when you're clear." "Good. Stand by," Eli said, moving quickly toward his next position. The tension of the moment was palpable, every second stretching as Eli worked against the clock. He knew the fight wasn't over yet, but he'd bought the neighborhood the chance it needed to take Axel down for good. Eli slipped through the side door of the warehouse, his breathing steady despite the pounding ache in his ribs. The blaring alarms and flashing lights echoed through the docks, pulling Axel's men toward the distraction Jenkins had triggered. Their shouts grew louder as they scrambled to locate the source of the chaos. "Eli, you're clear on the east side," Angie's voice crackled over the radio. "But they're catching on fast. You've got about a minute." Eli didn't respond, conserving his energy for the sprint to the perimeter. His limited vision caught faint outlines of the warehouse fence ahead, and every vibration and muffled footstep guided his approach. The weight of the evidence in his jacket reminded him what was at stake. He reached the gate and slipped through, his movements swift and deliberate. The sound of boots pounding on concrete echoed behind him, closer than he liked. "Move it, Eli!" Jenkins's voice came through sharply as the glow of the van's headlights came into view. Eli rushed toward the vehicle, the vibrations of its idling engine steadying his focus. He pulled the door open and climbed in, wincing as his ribs protested. Jenkins didn't wait, hitting the gas and steering them into the maze of dockside streets. "They're swarming the place," Jenkins said, glancing in the rearview mirror. "If you'd been 30 seconds slower—" "I wasn't," Eli cut in, his voice calm but firm. He leaned back, steadying his breathing as the van rumbled through the dark streets. They made their way to the garage behind Maya's diner, the tension in the van thick despite the escape. Angie was already waiting when they arrived, her arms crossed and her expression taut with worry. Maya stood in the doorway, her face lined with concern but unwavering. As the van rolled to a stop, Eli stepped out, handing Angie the pouch containing the evidence. "This is everything," he said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion in his frame. "Documents, recordings. Enough to bring Axel down. But we can't give it to just anyone." Angie frowned as she opened the pouch, her sharp eyes scanning its contents. "You think some of the cops are in on it?" "I know they are," Eli replied. "Axel's been operating too freely for too long. He's got people on his payroll, and if we hand this over to the wrong one, it'll disappear." Inside the diner, the group gathered around a table cluttered with evidence. Angie leafed through the papers, her movements precise and deliberate. Maya watched quietly, her arms folded, while Jenkins leaned against the wall, his face thoughtful. "This is solid," Angie said, holding up a ledger. "Names, addresses, money trails. If we can tie this to the right people, we'll shut Axel down. Assuming we can find someone we can trust," Jenkins added, his voice laced with skepticism. "Cops like Ruiz might do the right thing, but how many others are like him?" Eli nodded, tapping his fingers lightly on the table. "We test them first. We don't hand over everything at once, just enough to see who's willing to act and who's not." "And if they're not?" Maya asked, her voice edged with worry. "Then we keep looking," Eli said firmly. "We find someone who is." The group worked quickly over the next 2 days, carefully probing the precinct for potential allies. Maya asked discreet questions of her regulars at the diner, while Angie cross-referenced names in the evidence with rumors and reports of corruption. Jenkins tested officers by reporting minor gang activity, watching to see who responded and who turned a blind eye. By the third evening, patterns emerged. Officer Ruiz and a small group of his colleagues consistently acted on reports, stood their ground against gang influence, and showed a commitment to the community. Angie laid the findings out on the table, her voice calm but resolute. "Ruiz is clean," she said, "and he's got a few people he trusts. If we're going to move on this, it has to be through him." Maya nodded, her gaze shifting to Eli. "But what if Axel's watching Ruiz? If we hand over too much too fast, it could put him in danger." Eli's expression didn't waver. "We give him just enough to make a move, something small and actionable. Enough to force Axel's operation to react without showing all our cards. Once we see how Ruiz handles it, we'll know how far we can trust him." The team exchanged glances, their determination growing despite the risks. Jenkins leaned forward, tapping the table. "Whatever we give him, it better make a splash. Axel needs to know we're not playing around." Eli straightened, his grip firm on his cane. "He'll know. And once Ruiz moves, Axel's grip on this neighborhood will start to break." The room fell quiet, the weight of the moment settling over them. They weren't just fighting Axel. They were fighting for their home, their lives, and their future. And together, they were ready to finish what they'd started. The street was quiet, as Eli, Angie, and Jenkins waited near the corner where Officer Ruiz was set to make his nightly patrol. The cool night air carried the faint hum of distant traffic, but the shadows around them were still and heavy with tension. "Are you sure about this?" Jenkins muttered, leaning against a lamp post, his eyes scanning the street. "He could just as easily take the evidence and turn us in." "We don't have a choice," Eli replied, his tone calm but resolute. "Ruiz has a record of standing up to people like Axel. He's our best shot." Angie stood a few steps away, her arms crossed. "Let's hope your instincts are right, Eli. If he's dirty, this whole thing blows up in our faces." Eli didn't respond, tilting his head slightly as the faint sound of footsteps reached his ears. Ruiz was close. Moments later, Officer Ruiz appeared at the far end of the street, his patrol slow and deliberate. His uniform caught the dim light of a nearby lamppost, and he carried himself with the weariness of someone who had seen too much. Eli stepped forward, his cane tapping softly against the ground as he emerged from the shadows. "Officer Ruiz," he called out, his voice steady but low. Ruiz stopped, his hand instinctively going to his holster. "Who's there?" "Someone who needs your help," Eli replied. Ruiz's gaze darted toward Angie and Jenkins, who stayed just out of the light. "You're making a dangerous move," Approaching me like this? Who are you? Eli stepped closer, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. Someone who knows you've been trying to protect this neighborhood. We have something that can help you take down the people tearing it apart. Ruiz frowned, his hand relaxing slightly. What are you talking about? Angie stepped forward, holding out the pouch of evidence. This, she said, her voice firm. Names, ledgers, recordings. Enough to bury Axel and his operation. Ruiz's eyes narrowed as he took the pouch, his movements cautious. He opened it and pulled out the papers, his brow furrowing as he scanned the contents. This is serious, he said after a moment, his tone laced with both intrigue and suspicion. Where did you get this? From the source, Eli replied. Axel's warehouse. This is just a piece of what he's doing. Ruiz's gaze snapped back to Eli, his expression hardening. You broke into Axel's operation? Do you have any idea how dangerous that is? We do, Angie said sharply. That's why we need you to act. You've seen what Axel's done to this neighborhood. This is your chance to stop him. Ruiz exhaled, running a hand through his hair. If this is legit, it's enough to get a warrant. Maybe even enough to start an investigation. But if Axel's got people inside the precinct, and I'm sure he does, this could blow up in all of our faces. That's why we're coming to you, Eli said. You've stood up to him before. We need someone we can trust. Ruiz studied them for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded. All right. I'll take this to someone I know I can trust. But if this goes south, it won't, Eli interrupted. Just make sure it gets to the right hands. Ruiz slipped the pouch into his jacket, his shoulders tense. You've put a target on your backs doing this. Stay out of sight, and let me handle it from here. Eli nodded, stepping back. We're counting on you, Ruiz. The officer glanced at them one last time before continuing down the street, his steps heavier now, burdened by the weight of what he carried. As his figure disappeared into the darkness, Angie let out a slow breath. Well, that's done. Let's hope he's as clean as we think he is. He will be, Eli said quietly. Now, we wait. The group melted back into the shadows, their work for the night complete. The future of their fight now in Ruiz's hands. Eli sat at his small kitchen table, the soft morning light filtering through the curtains. His body was sore from the events of the night before, every bruise and ache a reminder of how close things had come. The cane leaned against the wall nearby, its familiar weight a small comfort. The quiet of the morning was deceptive. Eli could feel it, the tension, the lingering sense that something was coming. He didn't have long to wonder. A sharp knock at the door shattered the stillness, loud and deliberate. Eli! A voice barked from outside. It was deep, commanding, and unmistakable. Axel! Eli's heart tightened, but his face remained impassive. He reached for his cane as the knock came again, harder this time. I know you're in there, Axel growled. You didn't think I'd let last night slide, did you? Open the damn door! Eli rose slowly, his ears tuning into the vibrations of heavy footsteps on the porch and the low murmurs of voices. Axel wasn't alone. The door rattled as someone kicked it. I'm giving you one chance, Axel called. Open up, or we're coming in. Eli's grip on his cane tightened, his stance steady as he positioned himself in the middle of the room. His mind raced, assessing his options. He'd faced worse odds before, but the narrow space and their numbers didn't work in his favor. The door burst open with a loud crack, the frame splintering as Axel stormed in. Eli caught the faint blur of his figure, tall and broad, followed by several of his men. Their footsteps were heavy, the room filling with their presence. You've got a lot of nerve, Axel said, his tone sharp and seething. You think you can humiliate me? Walk into my warehouse, take what's mine, and just get away with it? Eli remained still, his unseeing eyes fixed forward. You made the mistake of coming after me first. Axel laughed harshly, shaking his head. You're still talking big, huh? Let's see how tough you are when I take you apart piece by piece. One of Axel's men stepped forward, gripping a crowbar in his hand. Let me handle him, boss. Axel held up a hand to stop him. No. He's mine. Eli's body tensed, his senses tuned to every movement. He could feel the weight of the confrontation closing in. There was no easy way out. And he knew it. "You should have stayed out of my way," Axel said, taking another step closer. "You think you're some kind of hero? You're nothing, old man. And I'm about to prove it." The air grew heavier, the room charged with the impending violence. Axel's men spread out, closing in slowly, their movements deliberate and confident. And then, cutting through the tension like a blade, came the distant sound of police sirens. Axel froze for a moment as the faint sound of sirens reached his ears, then let out a sharp laugh. "You hear that, old man? Guess someone thought they could call the cops on me." He turned to his men, his confidence unshaken. "Relax, boys. It's probably Peterson or one of his buddies. They'll clear out once I have a word with them." Eli stood still, his grip on the cane firm but steady. He didn't respond, his head tilted slightly as he listened to the growing noise outside. Axel sneered at him. "You really think the cops scare me? Half of them work for me. If this is your big plan, it's pathetic." The sound of the sirens grew louder, cutting through the tension in the room. Axel signaled to one of his men. "Go see who it is. Tell them we're just having a little chat, and make sure they know to stay out of it." The man nodded, heading toward the door. A moment later, his voice called back, nervous and uncertain. Boss? You might want to see this." Axel frowned, the first crack in his confidence showing. He stormed toward the door, Eli listening intently to his heavy steps. "Who is it?" Axel barked, stepping outside. The sight that greeted him wiped the smirk from his face. A line of police cars blocked the street, their lights flashing red and blue in the morning haze. Officers were stepping out, weapons drawn, but none of them were familiar. No Peterson, no friendly faces. Axel's expression twisted with confusion and anger. "Who the hell are these guys?" he muttered. The lead officer, a tall man with a sharp gaze, stepped forward. "Axel Kane, step away from the house and put your hands where we can see them. Now." Axel didn't move, his mind racing. "Who sent you?" he demanded, his voice faltering slightly. The officer's expression didn't waver. "This isn't a negotiation. Hands up, now." Axel turned back toward the house, his bravado slipping. "Something's not right," he muttered to himself. He glanced at Eli, his anger replaced by something closer to panic. "What did you do?" Eli tilted his head toward Axel, his voice calm but sharp. "Told you, Axel. You've already lost." Axel's men began shifting uneasily, the weight of the moment sinking in as more officers surrounded the house. The reality was undeniable now. This wasn't one of Axel's allies coming to smooth things over. This was something much bigger. "Boss, what do we do?" one of his men whispered, his voice trembling. Axel didn't answer, his eyes darting between the officers outside and Eli standing calmly in the room. His grip on control was slipping fast, and he knew it. Axel's gaze snapped back to Eli, his face contorted with rage and desperation. "You think this is over?" he growled, his voice low and venomous. The tension in the room was thick, every one of his men frozen in place as the sounds of officers moving closer filled the air. Without warning, Axel lunged at Eli, his fists clenched and his movements fueled by raw fury. "I'll deal with you myself." Eli's body tensed, his grip tightening on the cane. Though Axel's movements were wild, Eli could feel the force behind them, the desperation of a man cornered and out of options. As Axel closed the distance, Eli pivoted smoothly, sidestepping the charge. The lunge left Axel overextended, and Eli struck. His cane arced downward, connecting with Axel's knee with a sharp, calculated blow. Axel staggered, his momentum carrying him off balance. Before he could recover, Eli brought the cane up again, this time landing a solid strike across the side of Axel's head. The impact sent Axel sprawling to the floor, his body crumpling as the fight left him. He groaned, clutching his head, but he was down for the count. The chaos erupted almost instantly. Axel's men, startled by their leader's fall, turned their attention to the approaching police. Shouts filled the air as officers stormed the house, weapons drawn and commands ringing out. "On the ground! Hands behind your head!" Axel's men hesitated, some raising their hands while others tried to resist. One bolted for the back door, but was quickly tackled by an officer. Another swung at an approaching cop, only to be subdued with a swift takedown. Eli remained where he was, his cane resting lightly on the ground, his unseeing eyes fixed forward. He stood calm amid the chaos, listening to the shuffle of boots, the clatter of handcuffs, and the growled protests of Axel's men as they were restrained. Ruiz's voice cut through the noise as he stepped into the house, his presence commanding. "Everyone's in custody," he said firmly, his gaze sweeping the room. His eyes landed on Eli, and he nodded slightly. Eli turned his head toward the sound of Ruiz's voice. "Axel's yours," he said, his tone even. "You've got what you need?" Ruiz glanced at Axel, who was being dragged to his feet by two officers, his hands cuffed tightly behind his back. Blood trickled from a cut on his temple, and his face was twisted with rage. "You're done, Axel," Ruiz said, his voice steady. "This neighborhood doesn't belong to you anymore." Axel snarled, trying to twist free, but the officers held him firm. "You think this is over?" he spat, his voice hoarse. "I'll be out in no time, and I'll burn this place to the ground." Ruiz didn't flinch. "We'll see about that. We've got the evidence, and now we've got you. Your days of running this block are over." As Axel was dragged out, his men following behind in handcuffs, the house grew quieter. The storm had passed, leaving only the echoes of its chaos. Ruiz turned back to Eli, his expression softening. "You all right?" Eli nodded slightly. "I'll be fine. The neighborhood will too." Ruiz gave a small smile, respect clear in his eyes. "You did good, Eli. Real good." Eli tilted his head, listening to the fading sound of the police cars outside. "It wasn't just me," he said quietly. "This neighborhood fought back, and it won." The two men stood in silence for a moment, the weight of what had just transpired settling over them. The battle was over, but the victory belonged to more than just one man. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the diner as Eli stepped inside, his cane tapping softly against the tiled floor. The air was buzzing with muted conversations, but the tension was palpable. In the corner booth sat Ruiz, Angie, Jenkins, and Maya, their faces a mix of relief and determination. A folder full of documents lay open on the table, its contents scattered, as Ruiz leaned forward to explain. Eli moved toward them, and Maya stood, guiding him gently to a seat. "You made it," she said softly, her voice filled with warmth but laced with concern. Eli nodded, settling into the booth. "What's the status?" Ruiz tapped the folder, his expression serious. "Axel and his men are in custody, and the evidence you gave us was airtight. The recordings, ledgers, everything tied him directly to the drug and weapons trade. He's not getting out of this one." "And the dirty cops?" Angie asked, her arms crossed, her tone sharp. Ruiz's jaw tightened. "That's where it gets messy. Your evidence exposed a few key names, officers who were feeding Axel information or turning a blind eye to his operations. We've already started an internal investigation. The ones we've identified are suspended, and I'm pushing for immediate charges. It's going to take time to clean house, but this is the first step." Eli leaned forward slightly, his expression calm but firm. "It's not just about Axel. The neighborhood has to see this through. If they think nothing changes, someone else will take his place." Ruiz nodded. "Agreed. The precinct knows eyes are on them now. They can't afford to lose what little trust they have left." Jenkins leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming on the table. "And the gang? Axel might be out of commission, but his guys aren't going to just disappear." Ruiz's lips pressed into a thin line. "Most of them are already behind bars, thanks to the arrests last night. The rest are scrambling. Without Axel's leadership and funding, they're fractured. It's going to be a slow cleanup, but they've lost their grip on the block." Angie let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "It's a start," she said, her voice softer now. "But people are still scared. It's going to take more than a few arrests to fix what Axel broke." Eli turned his head slightly, his unseeing eyes seeming to meet each of theirs in turn. "Scars heal," he said, his voice low but steady. "But only if people believe it's worth fighting for. That starts with us." The table fell quiet, the weight of his words settling over them. Finally, Maya broke the silence. "You're right. This neighborhood has always been strong. It just needed a reminder of what it can be." Ruiz closed the folder and stood, extending a hand to Eli. "You gave it that reminder. I don't think we could have done this without you." Eli hesitated for a moment before shaking Ruiz's hand. "It wasn't just me. It was all of us." The group exchanged small smiles, a shared understanding passing between them. The fight wasn't over, but they had taken a step, a big one, toward reclaiming their neighborhood. As Ruiz gathered his things and prepared to leave, he paused at the door, looking back. "If you ever need anything, you know where to find me." Eli nodded, the faintest hint of a smile on his face. "Same to you." When the door closed behind him, the group sat quietly for a moment, the reality of their victory sinking in. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't final, but it was a win. And for the first time in a long time, the block felt just a little safer. Jenkins raised his coffee cup. "To the block," he said simply. Eli lifted his voice steady. "To the block." The others joined in, their cups clinking softly together. Outside, the street buzzed with life, the first signs of a brighter future beginning to take shape. Eli stepped out of the diner into the cool evening air, the sounds of the neighborhood humming softly around him, the distant murmur of conversations, the laughter of children playing on a nearby stoop, and the rhythmic squeak of an old bicycle wheel all painted a familiar picture in his mind. The cane in his hand tapped lightly against the cracked sidewalk as he began his walk home. His body still ached, and the bruises from the confrontation with Axel were a constant reminder of how close everything had come to unraveling. But there was a lightness in his step now, a quiet sense of satisfaction. They had done it. The neighborhood had stood its ground, and Axel's shadow over their lives was finally beginning to lift. As he walked, Eli's mind drifted. Being blind had always been a challenge, one he had learned to face head-on. But it had often felt like a wall between him and the world around him, and being black in a place where the odds were already stacked against him made that wall feel insurmountable at times. But tonight was different. Tonight, the walls seemed smaller. The sidewalk was uneven, its cracks and dips familiar under the soles of his boots. This block, this neighborhood, it wasn't just where he lived. It was part of who he was, part of what he was fighting for. His blindness didn't stop him from seeing that, and neither did the prejudice he'd faced his entire life. He passed by the corner store, its windows now lit with a soft glow, and heard Mr. Jenkins's voice calling out from inside. "Stay safe, Eli." The warmth in the older man's tone was unmistakable. "Always," Eli replied, raising a hand in acknowledgement. Each step brought him closer to his house, the rhythmic tapping of his cane a steady accompaniment to his thoughts. He remembered Axel's sneering voice, the hateful words meant to diminish him. But those words didn't hold power over him anymore. Axel was gone, his men scattered, and the block was still standing, stronger than before. Eli reached his front door and paused, his hand resting on the frame. The sounds of the neighborhood filled his senses, vibrant and alive. He tilted his head back slightly, letting the cool air brush against his face. He had never set out to be a hero. He was just a man, a blind black man who had chosen to stand when it mattered. And tonight, as the block began its quiet return to normalcy, he realized that was enough. He could make a difference, even when the odds were against him. Eli stepped inside, the familiar creak of the floorboards beneath his feet grounding him. He set his cane against the wall and let out a long, steady breath. For the first time in a long time, the house felt like home. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.